Here's a strange combination for you. An old woman, a young man with nothing to his name, and an octopus named Marcellus who understands grief better than most humans ever will. This film is quiet, almost unbearably quiet in places, and then it does something to you that you don't see coming until it's already done. We're breaking it down, every scene, every detail, everything that matters. Let's go. Meet Tova. She works as a janitor at a small aquarium in a coastal village, and her only real friend, the only one who listens to everything she says without getting bored, is Marcellus, a large octopus living in one of the tanks. Which sounds funny until you realize how much they have in common. Both solitary creatures, both in love with the sea, both carrying something they don't talk about. After her shift, she stops at the local market to pick up a few things. The owner, Ethan, spots her immediately. He's had a thing for Tova for a while now and he knows it, so he tries the casual route, starts talking about canned tuna and how you can make something great if you add the right sauce. Tova listens for exactly as long as it takes her to understand what's happening, then tells him to just ring her up because she has places to be. Ethan has been absorbing rejections from this woman for years. He takes this one the same way he takes all the others, quietly. Back home, Tova carefully hides her money in the usual spot. The house is full. Beautiful things, old things, a life built over decades. And here's the thing, she doesn't actually need to work, she has enough. The cleaning job isn't about money, it's about having somewhere to be, something to do, a reason to get up in the morning so the silence doesn't swallow her whole. She picks up a photo of her son. He died young. The grief on her face isn't dramatic, it's the kind that's been lived with so long it's become part of her posture. Then a recorded message plays from a nursing home. They tell her the application she submitted is finally accepted. She has a spot. If she doesn't register soon, she goes back to the bottom of a 3-year wait list. Tova doesn't respond, she doesn't call back, she just sits with it. Now meet Cameron. Cameron is a young man who has managed to reach his mid-20s without acquiring anything resembling a plan. He's charming in the way that only truly aimless people can be, like someone who's never worried about the future long enough to look tired. He drives a beat-up van, plays in a band, and spends most of his time living inside the kind of freedom that looks good from the outside and feels hollow from the inside. He's driving through the village when his van dies on him, just stops, right there on the side of the road. He gets out, kicks it a few times, the universal automotive repair technique, and then heads into Ethan's market to charge his phone. Ethan, who treats every new face in this village like breaking news, immediately strikes up a conversation. Cameron starts talking almost more than he should. He mentions he came here looking for someone, a specific person, someone with money who keeps avoiding him. He also mentions he plays in a band called Frico. Ethan has absolutely never heard of Frico in his life, but he nods along like he streams them every morning because that's the kind of man Ethan is. Meanwhile, Tova is having lunch with her 3 closest friends. They're talking over each other the way close friends do. Someone's nephew did something, someone's neighbor is involved with someone they shouldn't be, the whole village social ecosystem. Tova sits in the middle of all of this doing crochet, perfectly calm. Her friends ask why she's so quiet today. She tells them this is just her normal. After lunch, she goes straight to Marcellus, wraps both hands around the glass and tells him everything, all the gossip, all the news, what everyone said. Then she gets serious. She asks him genuinely whether selling the house and starting over in the nursing home is the right thing to do. Marcellus doesn't answer in words, obviously, but he listens, and sometimes that's what you actually need. Then something happens that nobody expected. Tova walks into the storage room to put away her supplies and finds the floor completely soaked. She's annoyed, she just cleaned this. She follows the trail of water and finds Marcellus wedged under a desk in a tangle of cables, his skin starting to change color. When an octopus stays away from water too long, their skin dries out. Their hearts slow down, all 3 of them. Tova doesn't panic. She frees him carefully, follows his path back through the pipes and gets him to the tank. The moment he hits the water, his color floods back, a deep, full red, alive again. Tova looks at him through the glass and says, "You have 8 arms and 1 brain, and you still manage to get yourself into situations like this." Marcellus, in the way that animals sometimes do things that are impossible to explain, reaches out 2 of his 8 arms and wraps them gently around her hand. Then shoves her to the floor. She lands hard, she's not seriously hurt, but she's on the ground, staring at the ceiling, completely caught off guard. What actually happened is that Marcellus felt something in the brief moment he touched her hand. A weight, something old and heavy. He reacted on instinct, the way creatures do when they sense pain they can't process. And in his way, whatever that means for an octopus, he makes a kind of private vow to pay her back for what she did. He saved the world's most emotionally loaded elderly woman from certain loneliness. He just doesn't know how yet. Next morning, Tova's foot is swollen from the fall. She stops at the market for painkillers. Ethan sees her limping and immediately shifts into full emergency mode, insisting on first aid, going to get supplies, ready to turn the whole market into a trauma center. Tova tells him it's a bruise. She wraps her own ankle, thanks him, and goes to work. She arrives to find a repairman named Tyria standing over Marcellus's tank trying to seal every possible gap. Apparently, Marcellus has been getting out regularly. He's also gained a significant amount of weight lately. Tyria delivers this information with the particular tone of someone who has resigned himself to the absurdity of his own life, and adds that old creatures always do strange things when they sense the end is getting closer. Tova absorbs this quietly, she's not ready to lose him too. This is where Cameron re-enters the picture. He's with Ethan, working through his problems out loud when his phone lights up with a video call from his bandmates. They're calling to tell him they're putting the band on pause. Life happened, responsibilities happened, the passion isn't there the same way anymore. Cameron argues, reasons with them, makes a case, loses. Ethan watches all of this. He looks at a young man sitting in a small coastal village with a broken van, a dissolved band, and no clear direction, and he has an idea. Tova is injured. The aquarium needs someone. The timing is almost suspicious. Cameron starts the next day. Tova watches him for exactly 30 seconds before realizing she has a problem. She comes in to find Cameron standing over Marcellus with a stick, nudging him toward the tank, like he's herding livestock. Marcellus, for his part, is plastered against the glass wall watching this unfold with what can only be described as profound disapproval. Tova takes the stick, tells Cameron firmly that you don't handle a living creature like that, and guides Marcellus herself, talking to him calmly until he moves on his own. Then she turns to Cameron and gives him a lesson, not in octopus management, in the concept of doing things right versus doing them quickly. Every task has a correct way and a lazy way, and so far he's been pulling off an impressive streak of the lazy way. She tells him she'll be reporting to Tyria that Marcellus nearly disappeared because of how he was handled. Cameron, who needs the money and knows it, does a complete behavioral reversal in under 10 seconds. He asks her to show him the right way. Tova shows him how to clean everything. How to remove gum stuck to the floor, how to wipe glass in circular motions without leaving streaks, how to do it once well instead of twice badly. At the end of the day, she finds herself telling him she's sorry she never got to teach him more. He tells her she just didn't live with him long enough for that. Tova doesn't know how to respond to that, she walks away. She gets another voicemail from the nursing home, 3 years on the wait list. If she delays any longer, it resets, 3 more years. She decides to go to the real estate office and at least look into selling the house. That evening, she imagines Drake walking into his room and saying goodnight. Not a memory, something between a memory and a hallucination. Something the mind does when it's getting close to letting go of something it can't afford to let go of. She doesn't call the realtor. She goes the next morning instead. Her 3 friends are sitting on a bench directly in front of the agency because this is a small village and there are no coincidences. They insist she join them. Tova tries every available exit strategy. None of them work. What she doesn't know is that Cameron is inside the building. He's been looking for a man named Simon, the owner of the agency, for a reason he hasn't told anyone yet. The receptionist, Jessica, explains that a man with 5 companies doesn't exactly have an open-door policy for walk-ins. While Cameron is processing this, a woman walks in, slightly frantic, moving fast. Her name is Ivory. She's asking about the hot water in the building because she showers here before work and someone turned it off. Before Cameron can fully register what's happening, she's already gone. He's out the door 30 seconds later. He finds her shop, a small surfboard and diving equipment placed right on the water. He walks in trying to look casual. She doesn't make it easy. She's direct, a little sharp, not particularly impressed by the fact that a strange young man has followed her to her workplace. She asks him how someone his age managed to achieve what he's clearly managed, which is absolutely nothing based on appearances. Cameron laughs, then says, yeah, fair point. He tells her he lives in a van, that the van belonged to his mother who passed away from an overdose, that he inherited the van because it was the only thing she left behind. Ivory softens immediately, apologizes, gives him a small tube of ointment for his neck which has been aching from sleeping in the van. He thanks her and leaves. Outside, a cop is writing him a ticket for parking in the middle of the road. Cameron runs over trying to explain. Tova appears from nowhere, knows the officer by name, tells him Cameron was giving her a ride because of her injury. The officer backs off. Tova then lectures Cameron for approximately 3 blocks about taking responsibility for his choices, why excuses are worse than the mistakes themselves, and the specific failure mode of people who make the same avoidable mistakes repeatedly. She also tells him to clean his van with a lemon and oil mixture before it embarrasses him further. Jessica takes Tova to the house. Tova asks her to keep this quiet, she's not ready for her friends to know yet, she just needs to see what it looks like on paper. Meanwhile, across the village, Cameron's bandmates video call to officially announce the pause. Cameron argues again, loses again, he stares at his phone for a while after the call ends. The next morning, Tova arrives at work and Cameron isn't there. She goes looking for him and finds him at Ethan's shop doing small repairs on the door. She confronts him, tells him whatever the reason is, it doesn't matter because having a job means showing up. Cameron tells her, with a frustration that's been building for days, to stop interfering with every step of his life. Tova goes quiet, she says, you're right, it's your life, I won't get involved again. She walks away. Ethan tells Cameron gently but clearly that wasn't right. Tova is one of the kindest people in this village. She's been a little withdrawn since she lost her husband and son, but her intentions are always good. Cameron, for a moment, doesn't process the second part. He asks Ethan she had a son. Ethan doesn't answer. Some things aren't his to tell. The next day, Tova doesn't come to work. She's giving Cameron room to manage on his own. What she doesn't see is that Cameron has been applying every single thing she taught him. Every technique, every sequence, every standard she held him to. He's doing it without anyone watching. He's all spending the empty hours talking to Marcellus about Ivory, about how every time he goes to her shop he loses his nerve at the last second. About his childhood, which was a series of temporary houses and temporary people. About his mother, who was gone before he ever really understood what he'd lost. He tells Marcellus about the box. When he cleaned out the van after his mother died, he found a box full of her old things. Photos, notes, memories, among them photos of a man he'd never seen before and a ring with the first letter of his name engraved on it. He tracked the ring to a name and the name to a company and the company to a small coastal village and a real estate agent called Simon. He came here believing this man was his father. Marcellus, sensing that the situation requires intervention, hides somewhere in the building, making himself impossible to find because he knows exactly what will happen next. Cameron panics and calls Tova. She comes immediately. Marcellus reveals himself the moment she walks through the door. Cameron apologizes for how he spoke to her before. Tova listens. Then she offers to help him find Simon. She goes and digs out an old telephone directory, the physical kind, from a shelf nobody has touched in years. Cameron didn't even know those still existed. The number is disconnected. So Tova closes the book and says, "The address is 80 kilometers away and my car works just fine." They drive. Cameron puts on his music, loud. Tova sits next to him covering her ears, but she's actually listening, and somewhere in the noise she's enjoying it. On the drive, she notices a message from Ivory on his phone. She asks if they're together. He tells her they're stuck in the high-end buy phase and have been for weeks. Tova looks at her phone, looks at him, waits until he's distracted. She calls Ivory from his phone, announces cheerfully that she's with Cameron right now and he's been talking about nothing else all day. Would Sunday work? Ivory says yes before Cameron can fully understand what just happened. They arrive at the address and it's wrong. Not just wrong, the man who lives there pulls out a gun and tells them to leave. Tova stays completely calm through this, which says something about how many difficult things she's already survived in her life. She takes Cameron to the beach, her beach, the one she goes to when things are too heavy to carry indoors. Cameron sits down next to her and finally talks about his mother. How she used to tell him about the day she told his father she was pregnant, how excited he was, how much he'd wanted a son. Cameron believed it, held on to it, found the ring and thought, this is the moment. This is where the story gets better. He was wrong. Tova doesn't try to fix it, she just sits with him. Things shift after that day. The warmth between them becomes something more comfortable, less performative. They stop being employer and employee and start being something harder to name. Ethan, who has been quietly gathering courage for something like 40 years, finally approaches Tova and asks if she'd like to have tea. Her face turns exactly the color it turns when she's surprised and hasn't decided what to do with that yet. She says yes. Her three friends find out through means that remain unclear and show up at her house the morning of the tea to help her choose an outfit. Tova looks at them and says it's tea. It's 1 cup of tea. They do not accept this framing. Cameron takes Ivory surfing. He is terrified of the water. He gets in anyway with the specific brand of courage that can only be explained by being very much in love with someone who surfs professionally. He spends most of it upside down, but he stays. Ethan takes Tova to the water's edge and talks about the years he spent watching this village grow, how much he loves seeing people build lives here, raise families, figure themselves out. Tova says that's the opposite of her instinct. She prefers solitude. Ethan says quietly without pushing that she was never really alone. The sea creatures were always around her. It's the right thing to say. Ivory tells Cameron over coffee that her 20s were a mess too, that the chaos he's living in right now is something she recognizes completely. For a moment, everything in this story is moving in the right direction. Then Ivory's teenage son walks through the door and calls Tova mom. Cameron goes completely still. Tova had mentioned disturbances before. This is apparently what she meant. The son wants help with calculus. Tova recovers first. She tells Cameron she wasn't sure how to bring it up. Cameron says he's going to go, let her handle this and he'll see her later. Ethan's enthusiasm, meanwhile, turns the tea into something more ambitious when he suggests they go surfing together. The memory of her husband catches Tova completely off guard and she spills tea down his shirt. End of date. At the end of that long day, Tova, Cameron, and Marcellus end up gathered together in the way that the three of them tend to end up gathered together, just existing in the same quiet space. Tova looks at Cameron and tells him something she has clearly been holding for a while. You still have a chance, but it requires you to apologize like a man who means it. Cameron says he knows. He says he's not sure he's capable of being that steady, that responsible, not when she's managed things he couldn't even begin to. He worries his presence in Ivory's life will destabilize something that works. Tova thinks about this, then says, go sing at the cafe on the edge of the village, try something in front of people, see what happens. He does. He gets on stage and opens his mouth and the crowd immediately looks like they'd rather be anywhere else. Tova, sitting in the front, turns and tells the room to be quiet, not suggests, tells, there is a difference. And something happens when the room goes silent. Cameron finds the song, really finds it, not the version of himself that performs for reactions but the version that actually has something to say. By the end of the song, every person in that cafe has put down whatever they were holding. It's the first time he's ever sung without needing the noise to hide behind. They walk back together and stay up late at Tova's house. She talks about Drake. She doesn't do this often. Drake's 13th birthday, she cooked his favorite meal. His friends came over and made faces at the food like it was terrible, and Drake joined in because 13-year-olds perform indifference in front of their friends. That night she caught him in the kitchen at midnight eating the leftovers alone in the dark. They both laughed until they couldn't breathe. She tells Cameron they only ever had one real fight, a period when Drake went quiet, wouldn't talk to anyone, clearly holding something. His father assumed there was a girl. When Tova asked Drake about it directly, he got so angry he knocked over a small figurine she'd inherited from her own mother. She couldn't hold herself together after that. They fought hard. That night Drake went out on the boat. He always went to the sea when things were too much. He didn't come back. 3 days later they found the boat drifting with the mast rope cut. She was certain it was an accident, until the police officer asked her, gently but directly, whether Drake might have done it himself. The village talked about it for a long time after. Tova didn't care about any of that. She only cared about one thing, the possibility that he was still angry with her when he died. Cameron doesn't say the right thing because there is no right thing, but he stays. He sleeps on the couch. Lunch with her friends the next day goes well until Drake's old school friend appears at the table. He heard the house was for sale. He came specifically to see it. Tova's friends are blindsided. Why didn't she tell them? She tries to move past it, explains she's planning to go to a nursing home. That she has nobody to look after her when she gets older. Her friends are hurt she didn't say something sooner. On the way out, Drake's friend pulls her aside. He says he never believed what they said about Drake, not for a second, because in the last months of Drake's life he was genuinely happy, deep, real happy. He was in love with a girl named Casey. Tova goes home and searches Drake's room. She needs to find Casey. She goes to her friend's house. Her daughter Jane was in school with Drake. She still has the yearbook. Tova finds the photo. Jane tells her Casey was with Simon from the real estate office. They were inseparable. The last strand of certainty Tova had, that Drake was happy when he died, just pulled apart. She apologizes to her friend. Her friend says, stop apologizing, we're real friends, being here for you when it's hard is not something you need to thank me for. Tova comes home. Cameron is making noise fixing something in the kitchen. She asks him to leave. Today has been too much and she needs the house to be quiet. Simon finally agrees to meet Cameron. They sit down and Simon tells him slowly, carefully, that he and Cameron's mother were very close once. She gradually pulled away. By the end she only reached out when there was a problem involving Cameron specifically. Simon watched Cameron's situation from a distance and never intervened, and he understands that looks terrible. But then Simon says there's been a misunderstanding. We were friends, nothing more. I don't know who your father is, I never did. Cameron has been holding this story for years. This trip, this village, this whole detour, all of it built on a thread that just snapped. He goes back to the aquarium to collect his bag. Tova is there. She apologizes for sending him away. He tells her it doesn't matter. He found out Simon isn't his father. He's done here. He takes the ring out of his pocket and drops it into the saltwater fish tank where the aggressive eel lives, and tells Tova she can leave the place as is because he's going. She tells him not to go, that if he has no one else he can stay here. He gets in the van and drives. Marcellus watches the ring sink into the tank. He thinks about what it would take to go in after it. The tank with the eel is not a safe place for an octopus. The eel is aggressive and Marcellus has an old trauma connected to exactly this kind of fish. He deliberates, then does it anyway. He jumps from his tank, crosses to the other tank, retrieves the ring and makes his way back. When Tova returns to check on him, she finds him standing very still next to the door of his tank, completely dry, dehydrated to the point that he can't move on his own. She carries a bucket of water to him and starts to bring him back. She notices, carrying him, that he wasn't facing the water. He was facing the door, looking out through the glass toward the sky. She understands. She drives him to the ocean. She carries him into the water herself. He floats for a moment, then looks back at her once, then swims. She watches him go. In the bucket she finds the ring. She turns it over in her hands and reads the engraving carefully. She stops. Cameron can't do it. He turns the van around. He walks back in and finds Tova standing there holding the ring. She tells him she has something strange to tell him. She hands him the ring. She says, "The letters engraved here are the letters of my son's name, Drake." Cameron's father was Drake. This is why Marcellus went after the ring. He saw what they couldn't, the shape of this connection, the thread running between these two people who ended up in the same place without understanding why. Tova isn't just the woman who taught him how to clean glass, she's his grandmother. Cameron tries to hold that word in his head and can't quite fit it there yet, but he's smiling. He tells her he never imagined that after everything he'd end up with a grandmother at the end of all this. He goes to Ivory and apologizes, really apologizes, not the version designed to get results but the version that acknowledges exactly what he did wrong. She looks at him for a moment, then forgives him. Tova stops by Ethan's market and brings him a new shirt, a replacement for the one she ruined with tea. Ethan accepts it. They don't make it into anything more than what it is. Cameron moves his few things into Drake's old room. Going through the closet he finds a box that was hidden, the kind of hiding that takes effort. Inside are photographs of his mother and Drake together, years of moments that were never shared with anyone. And underneath them, a folded piece of paper with a single name written on it. Cameron. Drake named him. Tova looks at the piece of paper and finally fully lets herself believe it. Her son was happy. He was in love and he was building something and he had given his child a name. She was not the last thing he thought about. They have a party in the garden, small, just Tova, Cameron, her friends, Ethan and Ivory. Someone starts a fire. Someone brings food. The evening goes long and warm in the way that good evenings do. Cameron sits in the middle of it and feels something he doesn't have a name for yet. Later he will understand that it's what it feels like to belong somewhere. If that kind of storytelling is what you're here for, you're exactly in the right place. New breakdowns every week. Hit subscribe and we'll see you there.